This is the game that saved the PlayStation, defined a decade and taught an entire generation that tank controls were basically a mathematical IQ test. But behind the safari shots and the dual pistols lies the story of a creative betrayal, pointy polygons and the greatest urban legend in gaming history. They told the developers that a female lead would never sell. They told them that 3D platforming was a technical impossibility, and then in 1996, a team of 6 people in a small house in Derby accidentally created a global sex symbol because of a shaky mouse hand and a telephone directory.
Mom know about this?
Nope.
Welcome to the PSX Index. I'm Parasan. We're on a mission to play, review and archive every single one of the 1,278 games released for the original PlayStation's North American library. Today we tackle the foundational pillar of the 32-bit era. Game number 7 is Tomb Raider. If I sound a little more adventurous today, it's because we're finally dealing with a game that wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural supernova. If you were a kid in 96, this wasn't just a game, it was a certificate of cool. But before we dive into the snow of Peru, we have to look back at the absolute madness it took to get here. 7 games into this mission, and I'm already starting to see polygons when I close my eyes. To get to Lara, we had to survive the mitochondria melting stress of Parasite Eve 2 on nightmare mode because apparently I don't value my own sanity. We've embraced the tactical espionage of Metal Gear, the road rage of Twisted Metal and the orange blare of Crash Bandicoot. But today the shouting stops. We trade the car bombs and the combos for the sound of the wind and the crunch of snow. We're going back to a time when Lara Croft wasn't just a character, she was the face of a new world. This is the origin of the modern blockbuster, and it all starts with a woman, 2 pistols and a very unfortunate wolf. Let's go behind the curtain. You might think a game this massive was made by some high-tech glass-walled skyscraper, but it was made by the Derby 6 at Core Design. Imagine 6 guys in a converted Victorian house. It was so cramped they probably had to step over each other's wires just to get a brew, but there's a bit of a history people forget. Tomb Raider was actually a timed exclusive for the Sega Saturn. Sony didn't even want it at first. They looked at an early demo and basically said no thanks, it looks a bit rubbish. It wasn't until the game launched on Saturn and started flying off the shelves that Sony realised they'd made a massive blunder. They backpedaled so fast they nearly broke the sound barrier, signing a deal to keep the sequels exclusive to PlayStation for years. That decision basically buried the Saturn and crowned the PS1. It's one of the greatest I told you so moments in the business history. Lead designer Toby Gard originally wanted a male lead, basically Indiana Jones, but the publishers at Eidos were terrified of a George Lucas legal team. Toby's solution? What if it's a woman? The bosses were terrified. The prevailing wisdom back then was that girls don't sell games, but Toby stood his ground. He didn't want a damsel, he wanted an elite professional explorer. Even the name was a fluke. She was originally Lara Cruz, a South American mercenary, but the team wanted it to sound British. Legend has it they literally opened the Derby telephone directory and thumbed through the names until they found Croft. It sounded posh, it sounded like she owned a mansion. And we have to talk about the pointy incident. Toby Gard was adjusting Lara's character model and his mouse slipped, increasing her chest dimensions by 150%. The team saw it, the marketing department smelled money, and they told him do not hit undo. It was a technical slip up that created a global sex symbol. Toby Gard eventually left Core because he hated the over-sexualization of his character, but the impact was undeniable. Lara was the first digital celebrity purely because of a phone book and a shaky mouse hand. Before we go to Peru, we have to talk about the gym. In the first Tomb Raider, Lara's mansion wasn't the sprawling playground it would become. It was quiet, it was empty, there was no butler following you around. Winston wouldn't arrive to be bullied until the next game. This was just Lara, in a tracksuit, in a house that felt too big for one person. It was the perfect tutorial because it was completely optional. You weren't forced to press X to jump screen, you just had to figure it out. This is where we all learned the swan dive. If you didn't spend your entire Saturday morning trying to swan dive into the swimming pool from the highest possible ledge, only to hit the concrete with a sickening crunch, were you even alive in the 90s? This is also where we fell in love with Shelley Blonde's voice acting, specifically her delivery of the word
No.
If you tried to interact with a wall or a door that wasn't meant for you, she just gave you a firm, posh rejection. It was the soundtrack of my 1996. It made Lara feel like she had a personality. She wasn't just your puppet. She was an elite explorer who was currently very annoyed that you didn't know how to navigate her living room. We have to address the elephant in the room, the tank controls. Today, modern gamers look at Tomb Raider like it's broken. It's not broken, it's mathematical. The entire world of Tomb Raider is built on a grid system. Every block is a specific size. A stand and jump covers exactly 2 blocks. A run and jump covers exactly 3. To grab a ledge, you have to be within a specific pixel range. It was a geometric ballet. You couldn't just run and jump. You had to count your steps. You had to hop back to give yourself a run up. You had to treat every ledge like a life or death calculation, and if you messed up the math, you got the crunch. That sickening sound of Lara hitting the floor is the most traumatic noise of the 32-bit era. It's the sound of a Saturday afternoon being ruined. But because it was so hard, finally reaching a ledge like that felt like a genuine achievement. You weren't just pushing a stick, you were mastering C++ logic. Can we talk about the logistics for a second? Lara is doing backflips over lava and shimmying across freezing crevices while carrying a backpack that must weigh as much as a small car. She's got 3 sets of ancient keys, 2 massive pistols, 5 medikits, a literal golden idol, and enough ammo to start a small war. It's the first inventory Tetris we ever really played. She never looked encumbered. She never looked tired. She just pulls a pair of magnesium flares out of her back pocket like it's nothing. And the flares? In 1996, the dynamic lighting of those flares was terrifying. Lighting one in a dark Peruvian corridor felt like a temporary lease on life. When it flickered out, you weren't just in the dark, you were in the mouth of whatever was waiting for you. Level 1, the mountain caves. This is where the index gets serious. Most games in 96 were trying to be loud and arcadey. Tomb Raider was different. It used silence as a weapon. You are left at the entrance of a cave with no map, no objective markers, and no hand-holding, just the howling wind and the sound of your boots in the snow. It was lonely, it was terrifying. As a kid, this silence made me hyper-aware of every polygon. When those first wolves jumped out of the shadows, I didn't just play the game, I vibrated with fear. The PS1 wasn't just showing me pixels, it was building a sense of dread. Then we hit the Lost Valley. This is a top 5 moment in gaming history. You wander into a jungle, the orchestral music swells, and the ground starts to shake, and then out of the fog, a literal T-Rex charges at you. There was no boss health bar, just you, 2 pistols with infinite ammo, and a prehistoric nightmare. Most of us just hid in that tiny cave entrance and spent 10 minutes chipping away at his health like cowards. It wasn't heroic explorer behaviour, it was survival. But when that giant lizard finally hit the ground with a thud, you felt like a god. And let's talk about the save crystal anxiety. On the PlayStation, we had save crystals. 1 save per crystal. I'd stand in front of a crystal for 5 minutes sweating, thinking, is this the right time? What if there's a trap in the next room? It turned an adventure into a survival horror game. You weren't just managing ammo, you were managing your own timeline. Greece is where the game stops playing fair. St. Francis Folly is a masterclass in vertical level design. It's a giant tower where 1 slip sends you back to the Stone Age. This level introduced the 4 god rooms. 4. Atlas, Damocles and Neptune. The Damocles room is the standout. You walk in, see a room full of keys and think, this is too easy. Then you grab the key and the ceiling, covered in swords, starts dropping them as you walk under them. It was pure psychological torture. This is where we met our rival, Pierre Dupont. He's the most annoying man in Europe. He shows up, shoots at you, and then instead of running away, he just despawns. He's a French magician. Lara calls him a litterbug because she finds his campsite and a tin can. Lara is currently shooting every endangered animal in a 50-mile radius, but she's judging Pierre for his lack of recycling. This is peak British snobbery. Then we get to the cistern. If St. Francis Folly was about looking up, the cistern is about looking down. It's the first true water level that didn't feel like a chore. You have to navigate a massive flooded chamber, changing the water levels to access different rooms. It was the first time I realised that 3D level design could be a three-dimensional puzzle. It wasn't just about getting from A to B. It was about understanding how the environment shifted. If you forgot a key at the bottom and then flooded the room, you were in for a long swim. It was punishing, but it made the sense of relief when you finally emerged into the sunlight of the next level, feeling like a physical weight being lifted off your shoulders. One of the most creative moments in the index is Palace Midas. You find a giant broken statue of King Midas. Now if you're a curious kid, you see that giant stone hand and you think, can I climb that? The answer is yes, and the result is the most iconic death animation in the series. Lara doesn't just die, she turns into solid reflective gold. I spent an entire afternoon trying to figure out if Gold Lara was a secret power-up. It wasn't, it was the developers being stylish while they murdered me. By the time you get to Egypt, the action part takes a back seat to environmental terror. The Sphinx, the moving blocks, the puzzles that require a PhD in ancient architecture. It was exhausting, but standing on the head of the Sphinx looking down, that was the moment we realised the PS1 could do epic. It felt like we were finally playing the movies we grew up watching. The final act shifts the genre entirely. We go from Indiana Jones to Alien. The walls are made of pulsating flesh. There are incubators birthing skinless mutants. It's gross, it's wet, and it's weirdly high concept for a 90s game. And then, the doppelganger. A skinless version of Lara that mimics your every move. You can't shoot it because you're essentially shooting yourself. You have to use the grid system to trick your bacon self into falling into a lava pit. It's a genius use of the game's mechanics. It wasn't about who had the bigger gun, it was about who understood the rules of the world better. Before we wrap up, we have to talk about the great playground lie, the nude code. Every school had a kid who knew a guy who knew it. We spent weeks entering L1, R1, L2, R2, up, down, square, like we were trying to launch a nuclear missile, only to realise the internet lied to us before the internet even existed. It was the first fake news of the gaming world, but the real legacy isn't the marketing, it's the atmosphere. Tomb Raider was a game about being alone. In an era where every game was trying to be extreme and loud, Tomb Raider was quiet. It trusted you to find your own way. The verdict: on the PSX index, Tomb Raider is an undisputed S-tier essential. It is the DNA of everything from Uncharted to The Last of Us. It's clunky, yeah, the camera is your worst enemy and the save system is a war crime, but the feeling of discovery, it's never been topped. 7 games down, 1,271 to go. The index is moving fast. Next time, we stay in the realm of the Namco Titans. We've seen what the Fist can do in Tekken, but for episode 8, we're lacing the steel with Soul. Soul Blade. I've been Parasine, and this is the PSX Index. I'll see you at the stage of history.